Hey everyone, welcome to this new episode of LinkedIn for Leaders. I'm your host, Karan Malhotra. This is a show that we do every week, every Thursday, to help you show up the best way in your whole self, and breaking that down into some practical strategies and tactics that can help you build your personal brand. And we do this through conversations with amazing individuals from all over the world. Today we have Ming Xia. Hey Xia, welcome to the show.
Hey, Karan. Nice to have you on again, and great conversations always.
Yeah, I mean, it's because she has some amazing energy, and I'm sure some people in the on the event page already mentioned that. So she is known for that. But today she has otherwise based in Southeast Asia. Though she did correct me, she said, I've been in Southeast Asia only very little bit. I've been traveling pretty much since 2021. So and even right now she's in Nice. But we'll come to that. But today we're going to chat with Shia about learnings from the startup universe, how to pitch yourself to strangers, going out there, whether you're going up on stage or whether you're having to put together a pitch deck, etc. How is it that you create engagement with people that you don't know? And that's really when you're building your own personal narrative on LinkedIn or any other place. You're reaching out to the void, right? So how is it that you create relatability? And we'll talk about some of that. But before that, a quick introduction about Shia. So Ming Xia was previously the head of global community at Draper Startup House on a mission to enable 1 million businesses. She's passionate about ecosystem building and bringing greater value through collaborations that empower. Curious to broaden perspectives while creating more collisions between the art and entrepreneurial world, Ming Xia is also building her next human passion project. She's currently on retirement year on a personal mission to do one creative thing a day. Welcome again, Shia.
Thank you. Thanks, Karan, for the nice introduction. That's
Great to have you. We had a little bit of back and forth with Shia because, you know, she was traveling and then I was trying to find a date and then I fixed on something and then she fixed on something. But finally, we're here. So happy to do this chat. And actually, on that, right, Shia, you've been traveling for a few months now, right? And you go into a different city and every city is full of strangers. So maybe if we can take like a step back broadly, because you love community building and meeting people, what would you say is your approach to just connecting with strangers?
right. Okay. So it's a little bit more curated than what it should. It always comes off as. So one of the things as well is that I've taken a step back from community building in the entrepreneurial world in the last year. But while in retirement year, I found that I lean into old habits and old habits die hard. So a few of the things I've been doing, for example, is like randomly, going to check out startup ecosystems, joining events, and once again, it's also having to pitch yourself. And it's interesting because one of the existential crisis that I had before was always like, if your work is in majority of the time that you spend when you're awake, how else will you present yourself to the rest of the world? Or like, what would the world remember you for beyond the work that you've done? So that's why sidetrack onto like why I ended up in retirement. Yeah, that was one of the reasons. I'm curious to see like what I let go of and how else would I receive that from the rest of the world again. So one of the things as well is if I join an event, for example, then an event always has multiple people in the room. And actually, what I loved before community building was people watching. So think of it as like if you're in a room full of strangers, everyone is individuals, 1 out of 8 billion in this world. And I think this is one part where like, AI can't really replace like people who come with
Mhm.
personalities, thought processes, and things that make them up as individuals, characters at the end of the day. So usually for me, it's always first reading the room before thinking of which stranger I want to approach. And it's like drawing a little bit of inspiration from watching films, right? In the past, if you're watching an amazing film from the 80s or something, and some actors or actresses, they're no longer alive, but their characters are so interesting. For me, it's always like, if you could ask them a question, what would it be?
Mhm.
So comes but before we can ask great questions, I think we need to be strong in active listening. So there's a few things. One is reading the room. The second one is picking the stranger to talk to. Uh,
Okay.
and then the third one is listening to what they say as well, and then approaching them. Yeah.
So on that, actually, how do you, quite often it's quite normal for us to, when you meet strangers, you're you're listening to them, but then, I feel that sometimes if you're only waiting to speak for them to stop, and then you're waiting to speak, you're not truly listening to them. So I
Right.
mean, is there something around that you actively practice?
Yes, definitely. So this is the part where I try my best to be not on autopilot, because if you're, for example, running an event and organizing something, you a lot of the times you always be thinking about operations, execution, what is next. Whereas if you're stuck in a conversation and you think about what is next, it's so easy for you to zone out from a conversation. And sometimes there's just so much things that's happening in 30 seconds that you chat with somebody. So one of the things that I always try and work on is that in a conversation, at least remembering three things that the person said. So even if in the best way that you can remember it, so maybe in terms of like keywords or certain things that they say where you're like, oh my god, I relate with this, or resonance in terms of in terms of like scenarios that you've encountered, or yeah, or a shared pain point. Especially in the entrepreneurial world, shared pain point is always the best way to take the conversation forward, because you'll be like, oh my god, I feel you. And that always helps break the ice always faster.
Yeah, I think some great points over there. From that, immediately, sort of what comes to mind is when people are sort of sharing something online, where they're writing something, right?
Yeah.
You can immediately pick out like two or three key points from that, and when you're commenting below that, because you're also starting a conversation, and then picking maybe one that sort of resonates. Because I think a lot of the time when people try and start a conversation online, it's like, especially when you're commenting, they're like, you've written this long piece and someone just says, great, well
Good
done,
job.
fantastic, good job, that kind of thing. And I mean, if you're not going to do that in person, why would you do that online, right? So some great points over there.
Yeah.
So I mean, the same kind of thing, if you were to then sort of flip that from, you've met hundreds and maybe thousands of founders and people who've come to you, either people officially pitching on a stage, or people just trying to get some input
Yes.
from you, etc. um, how is some of what you've mentioned, how is it that, how can they apply it to their approach to sort of pitching to a stranger? I mean, in their case, it might often be an investor, for example. But
Right.
I mean, do you, like, if a founder comes to you and say, listen, I don't know where to start, how to think of pitching, what are like a set of advice that you would give them?
Oh, that's a okay. So, yeah, okay. So this is interesting. One of the conversations that I had recently with my current host in Nice, whom I'm staying with, like basically my landlord. The other day we had this conversation, right, where he's like, "What is your claim of fame?"
Hmm.
So essentially, if you leave this world, what will people remember you for? And even I got stuck with that, because I always thought that, oh, all I ever wanted to be was a human being, a human work in progress. If you see it on LinkedIn, basically it's like in the art world, when you're creating art, there's always this hashtag that's called like work in progress. And so I always thought that if my life is art, I am therefore art, and hence the work in progress
Okay.
bit. And that's all I really thought about. But now I think Alfred, who is my B&B host, he kind of pull it up one notch higher, because now I have to figure out what my claim of fame would be. Um, and sometimes we always have this generic pitch of like leaving this world a better place. But the question is like how, and I think if I have 80 years of existence, I like to make at least 80,000 works of art. So one creative thing a day is the
Hmm.
mission that I'm on right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. That
yeah.
that that that's amazing. And let's say, how would you advise a founder to take this kind of approach to delve into something that makes them truly unique, and
Right.
is something that they're maybe the best at? How should they lead? Should they lead with that when they're pitching to a investor?
Yeah, so authenticity and being genuine is something that people will always remember you for. I think some of the struggles with when in the entrepreneurial world in the past, looking at people pitch, right? There are a lot of similar stories as to how a problem came about and essentially why they want to solve it. And
Mm.
if there's money in the bank, everybody of course wants a slice of the pie, and that's something where if you ask them, hey, so why do you think that there's value in this business, and they casually tell you, oh, because it's a problem that X, Y, and Z is solving, and there's an opportunity there. So it becomes so generic that no one exactly remembers you for it. Uh,
Hmm.
but historically, the other things that are learned from people in the community is also about learn their pain points. So they've always kept the stories personal on certain observations that they have, certain challenges that they encountered, and based on building that resonance, right? Because I think feelings, how people make you feel, is definitely one way that they can remember you with. Um,
Hmm.
and therefore that's one of the learnings as well, that from all these founders that I've interacted with, and later on, like when we are running events, I think that's always one thing that I'm always thinking of at the back of my mind. So coming back to your question on how should you pitch to a stranger, I think it's always about authenticity, being genuine, and creating that bridge for resonance, so at least you walk away with a shared feeling. Yeah.
That's very nice. I mean, and, and that's so true from some of what you said, right? It's important to lean into the feeling. Like, what is it that you're feeling then? What is that the other person is feeling? Because that's a live moment then and there, right? Like, I
Definitely.
mean, you and I are sharing this moment here right now. So, and it's so important to tune into what the other person might be feeling, thinking, etc.
Yeah.
And while I might, let's say, I'm building a real estate app, whatever, right? And there are hundreds of real estate apps. But if I've been able to tune into what is it that she is actually sort of looking for, and tune into where some of that feeling is coming behind some of the feedback that she's giving me, I mean, it's more likely that I'll make some sort of genuine connection, right? Much like what you were saying.
Ideally, yeah. So, if this came from, for example, if we're looking at the real estate app, and this came from a challenge of, what I'm a for me, in case in point, for example, I'm a short-term digital nomad traveler. So three characteristics there. I'm trying to find, and it cannot be too niche, right? Because if it's too niche, like current, if you're saying that, hey, I'm in Bangalore, I'm experiencing this problem, and it's so niche, then the challenge would be how do people find relatability with that. But if you always
Mhm.
keep it broad, but personal enough that it reaches out, then that's one way of yeah.
Okay, in terms of creating relatability,
Yeah.
and this is something that we also mentioned in the event notes, and I'm also curious to know, because you obviously there are different kinds of pitches that happen, right? So you have like an elevator pitch, literally, someone has hit, from the ground floor going up to the seventh floor. You have 30 seconds, so that's your 30-second elevator pitch. And then maybe you have a 3-minute pitch where you have 90 seconds on a stage, and maybe you have 15 minutes where you're one of 5 people in a room where it's going to be a little bit more discussion.
Right, that's right.
How would you advise the same founder to sort of approach each of these three?
All right, okay. So even in a room full of strangers, I think one of the most important thing is, I guess, maybe asking yourself, how, if you walk off this room with no regrets, how do you want people to remember you for? Whether that's for your business or that's for you as an individual. Like in my brain, I like to, like, if I went for a networking event, I like to walk away thinking somebody said, oh, Sia was interesting, based on her stories, or like based on my encounter with her, like she was really personal. um, so again, I guess that's a little bit of managing your own expectations as well. When
Mhm.
you go into a conversation or an elevator pitch, what do you have in mind? Like, what do you want as a call to action, right? Because think of yourself as, for example, a website, and someone is browsing that. So how would you want to change that? Yeah. So that's one of the things that I like to try and figure out always. So when I go, so it's always approaching things with an intention. Yeah.
Okay. And you would say that's the same in terms of how you want to be remembered whether it's 3 minutes or 15 minutes also?
Uh, okay, so that one, I'll expand a little bit on it. So essentially, if you're on a 30-second elevator pitch, then one of the key things is always like, what's your hook? So if you go in kind of knowing who that person is, or not. Maybe you can say like, my name is, just kind of keep things straightforward, almost like bullet points, right? So that it's not too complicated. If they have questions for you, they can digest what you say first. Yeah. So sometimes if you're caught in a lift with like four other people, then the introductions happen. You'll be like, my name is, and I am on a mission to, build something, and yeah, that's with if you have a startup, then with name of startup at the back. So generally, like, that's a format. There's a lot of things that can happen in 30 seconds, but maybe just set expectations again. Have maybe at most three sentences that you can say about yourself. Yeah. But I think the more important thing at the end is always, if you walk off the elevator, to have a handshake with the person, exchange contact. So that's your call to action, right? Your touch point number two, which is, apart from creating the impression, you made sure that, this person and you had a second point of interaction that was in person. Yeah. So it's not like, we're just having one more virtual call, or, yeah, thanks, see you later, or like, let's follow up, without a tangible like call to action. Yeah. So in the 30 seconds, that's key things that you kind of have 2 points. The elevator pitch is part one. The second thing is, right after that was the CTA.
Got it. And assuming I've got to like a 15-minute meeting with the same person, um,
Yeah.
what would
Okay.
you say?
Yeah, so yeah, if you have the 3 minute meeting with the same person, then you can probably allow a little bit more to share about like, maybe what's the problem that you encountered. So you can expand a little bit more on that, and the vision going forward with what you want to do. Yeah, and then so I'm thinking, if we're talking to investors or we're talking to like potential business partners, then these are the key things that you kind of have to say, because you've talked about the past and the present. Now what's next is really really important. And then for one with 15 minutes, if you're doing a one-to-one with an investor, then you probably want to go on into further details as to what your ask is and specifics of the ask. That's quite important, because at the end of the day, if there's money on the table, where that money goes is really really a key question as well.
And in each of these, what should I keep in mind in terms of relatability? Because I'm trying to make myself more and more relatable, such that this person, knows, likes, and trusts me to then maybe give me a check or something. Uh, is it just about just being in that moment and trying to sense the emotion and sort of working with the facts, or is there anything else that you would say?
Definitely. So coming back to what we discussed before, that it's always trying to read the room, right? And not always being ready to respond, but it's more of exercising the active listening. So some of the things as well is, coming back to relatability. If you're in an elevator, the only thing that you can do is probably make sure that you have a solid first impression, because first impression counts. How they will remember you based on the warmth, based on whether you're an asshole or not. Keeping it simple. And for 3 minutes and 15 minutes, that's probably the part where, like, if you want to build relatability, it could come out from the way that you're telling the story, the narrative about yourself, the way that you talk about yourself. So, for example, if you begin with like being self-deprecating, then people will be like, "Oh my god, like, not the best first impression." But on the other hand, if you say something like, listen, this is the problem that I encountered, and it really sucked, because I lost cash. And sometimes, like, this is something we've all lost cash before. So maybe that builds the relatability. But at the end of the day, you have to figure out what will join with the audience and how big that audience is in the room as well. Yeah.
Got it. And obviously now, just sort of building on this a little bit more, you typically find, and I'm sort of making very broad categorization over here, but quite
Yes.
often you will find startup founders who tend to be, a couple of years work experience or maybe even straight out of college. And then on
Mm-hmm.
the other end of the spectrum, you have people who have 15, 20 plus years of experience, and they now have an insight and they have pedigree, and now they're looking to get into the startup ecosystem, right? So
Right.
I mean, a lot of the people that I sort of engage with fit into that sort of category. Are there things that you feel that people who come from a corporate background they should keep in mind when pitching? Because it's now they might have got that 20 years of experience, but they're starting from ground zero. But does the pitch reflect that, or the way they come across, does that reflect that? I mean, any
Right.
thoughts there?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is a little bit of a hot take, but please don't roast me for this. When being in the startup world, I think I've encountered quite a number of consultants who, they've had like a very fulfilling career for like 20 years in corporates, building up large companies. However, one of the challenges is always thinking that, things are easily done or like money moves the needle. So at the end of the day, with money talks, then the way that they treat people can become a little bit impersonal.
Hmm.
Yeah, so actually it's been quite humbling based on like observing the way of like people's body language, the way that they speak, the way that they work with people. Because ultimately, for example, if you're working with investors and asking them for money, they might or might not invest in you based on your personality as well. So for example, if you're a founder in a pre-seed stage or a seed stage, and maybe a first-time founder as well, then certain things that they would gauge is based on the trust that they have towards this person.
Hmm.
And character builds trust. So those are certain things to observe. And apart from that, I think as compared to maybe like the youth who are like fresh from school, what more mature founders or founders who have 20 plus years of experience have as well is actually the the human interactions that they've had in the past that build them up to the leaders that they can be. And that's really important as well. So one of the examples that I have in mind, I mean, honestly, I think working with Vikram in Draper Startup House before, he gave me so much, he imparted me so much knowledge, and was very much a mentor for me in terms of working with people and approaching, partnerships, approaching community. When we're in a new market, how should we work with people? And I think one thing that he always had was kindness.
Hmm.
So kindness is at the core of everything that he does. Whether you're like a cleaner in the place or whether you are an investor, he treats everyone equally, which is just I think that's already like quite heartwarming to observe. And then the second thing is while I was abroad and I was freaking out in certain scenarios where sometimes if Vikram can't really travel to a place because he's got other commitments, and while we are dividing and conquering, like I call sometimes and freak out, and then he'll tell me like, "Listen, like just be a friend," and that is such a broad
Such good
phrase.
advice.
It's
Yeah.
good advice, yeah. So essentially, it challenged me to figure out like what being a friend looks like to people in the industry, to peers, and to equals as well. Yeah.
That's
So
re-
yeah, those were like great nuggets of wisdom from Vikram, essentially as a leader. Yeah.
No, fantastic. Some great insights over there. And we have only about 5 6 minutes, but I've just last couple of questions.
Okay.
So one obviously is, you were global head of community at DSH, right?
Yeah.
And you have to, when you're building community, you quite often have to invite people to buy into one idea, or one approach. So how do you do that? I mean, how do you motivate or get people excited to come on board? Because I mean, building community is something that a lot of people want to do, but essentially you're trying to galvanize people around one core thought. So how do you what has worked for you to make that happen?
Okay. Yeah. That's a tough one because community was never built by an individual. And I think one of the things is for me, what the community gave me when I first entered the startup world was always crowdsourced perspectives, right? And based on crowdsourcing, you create this opportunity for people to engage by giving them a chance to speak up if they don't always speak up, if they're more introverted, anyways. So these were like certain things where I walked away, for example, from Tribe Theory or Draper Startup House a couple of years ago when I first entered the startup hostel, feeling so inspired because everyone there had perspectives. Everyone knew their why, because a lot of the people who were living in the co-living space, they are all entrepreneurs or by default problem solvers. So they may be quite technical, but they mean well and they exercise empathy, and also challenge me to problem solve the way that they do. Yeah, so certain things over there that was really helpful as well was the way that they made me feel, and I try and as much as possible whenever I'm building up an event, I think it's always the way that I used to figure out the way that I was once lost. I think I was trying to replicate that on a way larger scale. But in order to do that, I really cannot do it by myself. And that's something where you need community to help you out with. And the best way is to have them champion a similar mission.
Mm.
Um, or find resonance based on their kind of people, their kind of tribe, and people that they want to identify more like. Yeah. So a few of these things to think about as well. And with events, when I was working on it, I think it's a lot of curation. A lot of community builders in especially in the Southeast Asian region, they are always operators. They tend to be more operators than anything, in the back end, focusing on what needs to happen next, how it should happen, the touch points, and everyone's done it quite with a lot of thought. Yeah. So that's how like effort pays as well. Because if you show that you put in thought to an event, and in exchange, when people are showing up, they are giving you their time. So there is an exchange, a transaction that is happening actually. And one of the things to always think about as well is, if you were to attend an event, why would you show up for that? Yeah, what kind of value can you walk away with? And value comes in different shapes and form. It doesn't always mean that you find 5 sales leads, or you find
Mm.
3 potential investors. Sometimes it's recognizing, hey, I'm not the only one who is going through this problem when I'm trying to build this business. I need to figure out someone who also figure out process automation, or someone who is also stuck in the same brainstorming phase. Yeah.
Amazing. So lots of learnings over there.
Yeah.
You've been on this retirement year and this break for, you've been traveling for the last 4 or 5 months now, and as you mentioned, you're not going to be heading back towards Asia soon. So, is there a learning that or a couple of learnings that you've had from your time, the recent travels that you could share?
Yeah, definitely. So at the start of this when we went live at the start, I was sharing a little bit of a sidetrack as to why I'm on the retirement year. But it's honestly a compounded series of reasons, and one of it was I really love my job at Draper Startup House, building community, being around people who always challenge me to be greater and to dream bigger. And one thing that I wanted to try and figure out more of was also who I am as an individual beyond work. Because I know, like within the industry, people remember Sia as like Sia being the community builder, or being within the startup ecosystem. But beyond that, I wanted to also reinforce or work on the part where I personally love art,
Mm.
and I've been focusing on trying to create stuff, because I think one of the important things as well as in this age of AI, for example, like a lot of people are using tech tools to build faster, and that growth is accelerated. But sometimes we forget that the process of growing is creating as well. So it's no longer
Mm.
just about consuming content. It's also about learning how to be able to create, how to think critically, and just let that flow. Yeah, and I think one of the challenges as well, a couple of years ago I was teaching art with kids, and kids, they before they are molded into certain shapes and forms and adults, they know how to have fun, right? And something about the entrepreneurial world as well brings back fun, because you get to build something, and that's an interesting process, right? Because you have fun in the process of building something, you feel satisfied. It's a little bit like the IKEA effect, where no pain, no gain, and later
Yeah,
on, a lot of pain, but also even more gains.
for sure.
And so for me, one of the things that I'm trying to do right now is to make sure that I have creative time at least once a day, to think about things, to be able to create, because growth happens in non-linear ways. It's not just your career. It's also learning about the way that you work with people, how you manage crisis if you're solo traveling and there's a very short turnaround time. Yeah, so I'm trying to put all those skills into my everyday over here, and that's proving to be effective, I guess.
Amazing. I think we're at time. I just have uh, three more quick questions.
Go for it.
What gives you energy?
What gives me energy? I feel like because I'm now in France, in Nice, I would love to say that I'm solar powered because the sun is always very refreshing. Uh,
Amazing.
and I mean, for me, I think it's when all else fails, I always turn to nature. So I on every single day right now on retirement year, I try to go for at least one walk a day because if you feel like life is stagnating, it's not really like that. You need a change of perspectives. That's what I need. I realize. So what gives me energy is hitting the ground, taking a walk. Even if a walk doesn't, give you a lot, at least it reframes your perspectives. If you think that you had a sucky day, somebody else had it even worse. If you're
Mhm.
in France, sometimes you see homeless people, you see the migrant situation, you see like politics escalating over here as well. In Singapore, there was not so much of this, and it was easy to continuously go with the efficiency as well. But over here, it helps with reframing. So for me, like the number one thing is taking a walk gives me energy. The second one is turning to nature, being less on the phone because if you're on the phone, you get, your dopamine kicks in from social media, from looking at your Reddit karma points going up. For me, a while it was like that, um, and whatnot. Yeah. And then the third one is, having the space to be able to talk to strangers again.
Amazing. What is one thing you can talk about every day for the next 1 year?
One thing that, ooh, all right. So this comes back to us as human beings because we are always very imperfect. And I think it comes back to humans and being kind with one another. And especially with the self, because, in a world where, especially for entrepreneurs, for example, you're always building things. And yes, we need to fail, we need to test, but we need to be able to fail. And failure is, not always the prettiest thing, but it's a very much needed process. So the next thing is like, how do we regulate our emotions and how do we remain kind to ourselves in that process? And for me, this is a topic that I've been exploring in the last 1 year as well, because sometimes, while traveling, shit hits the fan, almost miss a plane, almost miss a train, not knowing, strikes are happening and whatnot. So how do you always make sure that you are kind to yourself and kind to other people? Even whether it's in our individual pursuits or whether it's in businesses.
Got it. And where can people get in touch with you?
uh, it's either in real life, or because I'm not a deep fake, I'm not AI. Yeah, still 75% water. uh, yeah, and otherwise on LinkedIn or Instagram.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for this conversation, Chia. Not surprised as people expected at the end. She brought us through a lot of really interesting perspectives, and navigating a lot of that through her very unique energy. And I think she's definitely being kind to herself, and that's one key message that she leaves us with. Also, she's being kind to a lot of other people. That creates a different kind of resonance for everyone around. So thanks, Shia, for joining us. Thanks everyone for being here today. This is LinkedIn for Leaders. We do this every Thursday. Next Thursday, we're having a conversation with Aishwarya Ashok. I do a monthly LinkedIn Top Voice deconstruct. So Aishwarya is a LinkedIn Top Voice, which is an invite-only program. 0.0004% of all LinkedIn users get a top voice, and she's one of them. And she has managed to get that in the space of Gen AI and product, which there's so many people talking about Gen AI, right? So how is that she's got there? So we're going to talk about that next Thursday. Thanks for joining. Thanks for being here, Shia.
Thank you, Karn. Thanks for hosting me, and hopefully this has been helpful for everyone else.
For sure, I am sure it has.
All right,